Time is 7 o'clock. I'll call to order the regularly scheduled council meeting for January the 13th. As we call to order, we'd just like to acknowledge that we're doing our work on the traditional territories of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen people known today as the Songhees and Kasapsum or Esquimalt nations, and their historic connection to these lands continue to this day. Next item is approval of the agenda, moved and seconded. Any changes or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed, unopposed? Move to adoption of the minutes. We can do all three at the same time. Moved and seconded. Are there any changes or amendments to any of those? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed, unopposed? Rise and report. We just have a motion to rise and report on the appointment. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Mayor's remarks. Happy New Year, first and foremost. It's nice to be back here after a bit of a break. I hope everybody from staff onwards has had a good time, a little bit of a break from work and responsibilities. I want to just express my appreciation to the staff organizers, but also Ron Carter, who helped lay out the traditional Mayor and Council's Walk on New Year's Day, and which had a great turnout. I think we had about 75 people came and walked. It doesn't quite compare to the hundreds doing the polar bear swim, so we may need to do an official Mayor and Council polar bear swim next year if people are up for it. But it was great, and the people, there was many thousands who came out for the swimming and the skating and the things throughout the day. We also, for those here, celebrated a volunteers dinner. So we do this every year where we invite members of our volunteer committees as well as members of the public who do volunteer work on our behalf. And so that happened this weekend, and it was a great success and a very small token of our appreciation to be able to buy people a meal and just have some social time. So it's a good reminder just to thank everybody who spends their volunteer time helping to make our community better. And I just making the observation here as we kick off our work today, although it's not a terribly housing heavy agenda today, it's clear with letters arriving from Minister Callan before the break and our priorities for this year, which is a substantial OCP review looking at multifamily housing and implementing zoning related to infill housing and other aspects. It's going to be 2025 is going to be another year of housing in terms of where we're at and the work undertaken. So it'll take a considerable amount of time and energy from staff and council, but also I'm taking this opportunity just to invite members of the public. A lot of that work will involve public participation and input, both from residents and developers, community, and others to help guide those decision making. So we're looking forward to that work with both the public, staff, and council over the course of this year. Next item on the agenda is public comment and question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public in person or online. You can address items of interest to Oak Bay. This is not related to items on the agenda tonight. We'll have opportunities where there's public input allowed to have that public input, but this is just for other items of interest to the community for people to ask questions of council or just make general comments. So is anybody from the public who wishes to address council on items not on the agenda tonight? Invite you forward at this time. And the same invitation goes for anybody online. If you could use the Zoom app and raise your hand within that app, I can invite you into the meeting. Sometimes we have nobody, sometimes we have many people. So this is looking more like a not very many people evening tonight. I see a hand, sorry, I didn't see that. So please come forward. Oh, oh, go ahead. You need to push that. Yeah, so just you can demonstrate
Okay.
the appropriate course of action here, and that is just state your name for the record, and then your municipality of residence, and then you have up to 3 minutes to speak to council.
Okay, I am Shelby Kane. I live in Oak Bay, and I would just like to address council while you're all here. If you have been on Foul Bay Road, you know it's a very, very busy road with lots of cars going 50 kilometers an hour or more. And there's a specific intersection, Foul Bay at Kings Road, that has a bus stop on either side of the road, but no crosswalk to connect them. This has been a thing I've been kind of thinking about for a couple of years. I put out a sort of a survey and got many responses from people who have nearly been hit by cars trying to cross there. And it's at least like, 200 to 300 meters away from the nearest crosswalks on either side. And I think it would be a big improvement to safety if a pedestrian-controlled crosswalk was implemented at that location. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to turn to staff. I think as most things like that related to traffic control and pieces are referred to engineering. Or should I'm thinking here.
I've spoken to many people in engineering.
Okay, good. So we can, it's okay. So what we'll do is, because it was brought up here, we'll also just make sure this gets cycled back, that the comments here get to go back to the engineering department for review as part of that. There is always an engineering component to these things prior to any council. Some of these are delegated and some of them are not, but I appreciate always welcome to have these comments come forward, because sometimes the traffic and issues at intersections change over time. Anybody else wishes to address council? Don't see any other hands popping up, so I am happy to move on to the next item, which is our accessibility plan. This has been work underway for a while over the last year. Again, I've spoken to before, volunteers on that committee to help. Ms. Plouffe, welcome, as our Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Mayor Murdoch. So the report before council this evening is regarding the Council Priority Project 45, developing a program to improve diversity and inclusion, which included the creation of an accessibility committee and an accessibility plan. So staff retained left turn, right turn to work on the plan with the committee, and the staff, the consultants that worked with the staff and the committee on the creation of the draft accessibility plan are here this evening, and will be giving council a brief introduction and presentation to the plan. So I would like to go ahead and introduce Natalie Rose and Kara Wilkie from Left Turn, Right Turn. They are joining us tonight via Zoom, and they have been briefed on their time length and will do their best to stick to it.
Ms. Plouffe,
Hi.
welcome. Go ahead, Ms. Rose.
Thank you. Sorry, you can hear me? Fantastic. So thank you so much. Again, my name's Natalie Rose. I'm from Left Turn, Right Turn. I'm going to be sharing my screen just a moment. And I do want to thank all of you for prioritizing us on the early end, because it is later at night here where we are. So let me make sure I can share my screen here. And we will start the slideshow from the view. Kara, could you nod your head if it is? Perfect. Thank you so much.
Well, we have
so I'm going to...
It's not the correct view, it's the presenter view.
Yeah, it's a presenter view right now. You may need to share your other screen.
Share the other screen. Oh, that's not... Apologies, it is not. I'm going to do it like this. Is this okay for now? Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So once again, my name is Natalie Rose. I'm going to be speaking to you briefly today about the draft accessibility plan that we helped the District of Oak Bay to develop. We have a very brief agenda here. I'm going to start by covering just briefly why we're doing this and what we found through our assessment period. I'm going to go briefly over the draft action plans that currently appear in the draft plan, and then there'll be opportunity for discussion and questions.
Sounds good. If you can hold on half a second, I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to share this on our side just so that it's a little bit bigger? And just for those who are looking for, because some of this has some fine print, if you do go to the Oak Bay's website and look at the agenda, the full presentation is available in there as well, so you can look at it electronically and zoom in if you wish. But I got a nod from our support staff here that we can just share this, and then we can just make it full screen.
Perfect. Do you let me know when I should proceed?
Yep, just wait a second here, and I think we're almost ready. Perfect. Yeah, so I think we're on the second slide now, so there we go. Please continue.
Perfect. So to begin with, why did we engage in this process? The Accessible British Columbia Act was passed into law in 2021, and it really presents the District of Oak Bay to consider and reconsider how decisions are made within the district. We are aware that the District of Oak Bay is committed to identifying and removing barriers to accessibility across services, infrastructure, and programs. And the opportunity to develop and eventually publish the accessibility plan is a great opportunity to demonstrate that commitment. To prepare for this draft plan, the District of Oak Bay engaged the consulting firm Left Turn, Right Turn, that's where I'm from, to support in the assessment process, the consultations that we did, and ultimately drafting the plan. The District of Oak Bay Accessibility Advisory Committee, which has seen and is in approval of this plan, as well as the Staff Accessibility Working Group, will be responsible for monitoring the process of the accessibility plan. And as per the legislation, the plan will be reviewed and updated every 3 years. So how did we go about doing this? In consultation with district staff, LTRT engaged in a discovery process. We started by reviewing documents to help us know which initiatives had already been implemented or started by the district, as well as relevant policies and procedures. We also met with the staff working group on accessibility, as well as various individual staff members to help us better understand accessibility issues that staff were already aware of, as well as initiatives that had already taken place or were underway in respective departments. And finally, we facilitated several meetings with Oak Bay's Accessibility Advisory Committee, which was newly formed in the last year. And those meetings helped us to gather insights from the committee about what the priorities are for people who have disabilities in the district, who live in the district or visit the district. As well as to gather their feedback about the proposed actions that currently appear in the plan itself. So that's everything we did to kind of get to the point of drafting the plan. Now, very briefly, as an overview of some of the things that we found, we definitely recognize that staff and many people throughout the District of Oak Bay are committed to improving accessibility, and that this has been a priority in recent years. We did, however, find that some staff have different levels of knowledge related to accessibility best practices or how those practices can be incorporated into various aspects of their work day to day. And so this can be a challenge when trying to actually implement those accessibility improvements because we don't always know what we don't know. And so that was one challenge that we found. Another main challenge that came up throughout, and this is similar to many municipalities across the province and really across the country, is that you're working with many older public facilities. And these can present a lot of barriers to people with disabilities, mostly because they were constructed at a time when accessibility was not necessarily considered, or the standards weren't really in place to ensure that facilities were built to consider people with disabilities. And that's a challenge when it comes to infrastructure because we can't always just wave a magic wand and make changes there. It takes time and resources to make those changes. We did found that work has been done to improve accessibility of some facilities, in some cases on an interim basis, and a lot of staff are doing what they can to make it work with what they have. We also found that the pedestrian and sidewalk master plan, which is being implemented, is really going to help improve accessibility and road safety for both residents with and without disabilities. So I'm going to get into a high-level overview of the recommendations that are being made for what to include in the accessibility plan. And first of all, I wanted to just talk about how we arrived at these particular recommendations. So there's a few different things that we considered. We know that you cannot do everything all at once. And so we really had to prioritize what was going to appear in this first plan. So some of the factors we considered in how to make these recommendations were, one, really centering what was most important for people with disabilities who are living in and interacting with the district. We also wanted to prioritize the most consistent themes that we heard. So when something comes up over and over, we know that that's something many people are concerned about and should probably be a priority. We also wanted to make sure that we were prioritizing actions that align with broader work already underway at the district, and related to that, making sure that the recommendations are relevant, pragmatic, and actionable. We don't want to promise all the moon and the stars when we can't actually action those things. So we wanted to keep things realistic and pragmatic. And finally, we helped guide what went into the plan using our professional expertise, understanding accessibility best practices, and having worked with multiple municipalities across the country to design, draft, and implement similar accessibility plans. So I'm going to go over a very high level of the recommended actions, and we can answer any questions in the discussion period if we have them. So first of all, under the area of general and employment actions, we have 5 actions here recommended. The first one addresses one of the first barriers that we identified, which would be staff training. We recommend procuring and implementing training for all staff related to increasing their knowledge of accessibility, and also for frontline customer service staff who are interacting with people who have disabilities. We also are recommending that we include consideration for supporting the implementation of accessibility initiatives. We want to recommend that you consider accessibility improvements and some of the pieces that you might want to implement in upcoming budgets, and try to put support aside for these initiatives. Directly related to employees who potentially have disabilities who work at the district, we're recommending the development of an accommodations policy and procedure for staff who have disabilities. Also recommending a review of the recruitment and hiring process at the district to ensure that that process is equitable and that there are no barriers for potential employees who have disabilities. And finally, we recommend implementing a process for employee feedback. That could be related to feedback that employees have, being people with disabilities who work for the district, but also being able to provide feedback and recommendations for barriers that they have seen within the community. Under the area of services, we have 2 recommendations, both related to emergencies. So the first one is we're recommending emergency staff undergo training, both general and job specific. And this could be for a wide variety of reasons, but specifically for interacting with people who have disabilities, as well as providing accessible communications. And that's also related to our second recommendation, which is incorporating accessibility into all emergency planning and public education campaigns related to emergencies. So this is making sure that people with disabilities are being considered within those emergency plans, and that they have the right information that they need for what needs to happen within an emergency if they're experiencing one. Under the area of information and communications, there are 2 recommended actions, both of which are to develop and distribute some guidance within the district and for staff in particular. So we recommend the development of guidance related to accessible communications and actioning that guidance among all staff members who create communications with the public. This is to make sure that information is being distributed in equitable ways, and so everybody who lives in your district can access it. And the second one is to develop a set of guidelines for meeting accessibility, both for in-person meetings and virtual meetings. And I'll mention also hybrid meetings, which is what we're having right here as well. Under the area of the built environment, public spaces, and transportation, most of the recommendations here are related to doing some further assessment and then building some detailed plans out of that assessment. So the first recommendation that we have is to plan for accessibility. So this is making sure that accessibility standards at the highest level possible are being considered and incorporated when new public buildings are being developed, or also if public buildings are going through major renovations, sort of take that opportunity to improve accessibility when you can. We're recommending a review also of non-regulatory municipal signage to help determine what the current level of accessibility is for that signage. And once that review takes place, to develop a plan for how accessibility can be improved for that signage when the signage is being replaced. We're recommending, related to parking, conducting a review of the amount, availability, and placement of accessible parking spaces in municipal lots and on-street parking, and also doing a review of parking facility bylaw regarding accessible parking spaces required for private developments as well. And for transportation, we're recommending that you conduct a review of the accessibility of all bus stops and amenities. And once that review is done, creating a prioritization framework for how to make improvements in those locations. In the final area recommended by the Accessible British Columbia Act, which is procurement, we're recommending an update to procurement procedures to include accessibility considerations where applicable. And that is a very quick high-level overview of the recommended actions from the plan. At this point, welcome any discussion or questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well so that I can see everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. So just as all first few minutes here, council has the opportunity to ask questions of staff or the consultant. We will then go to the public. If there's any comments or questions from the public, we're happy to take those. We'll then come back to this table for consideration of the recommendations or alternates to that. At this case, really just to move forward with this plan as the recommendation. But before we get there, we're going to get to questions. So are there any questions? I have Councillor Patterson to start.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and to our presenters. Thanks so much for this presentation. It's great to see the committee up and running and that work is going forward. I did take a look at the 2024 stats for British Columbia, and it identifies that for British Columbians, about 20% of British Columbians between the ages of 15 and 64 live with a disability. And that rate increases to 42% for those 65 and over. So certainly it's a good percentage of British Columbians, and so this work is really warranted, and I'm really pleased to see it going forward. I do have just a clarification that I would like on the plan. I think overall it's well presented and a good starting draft document for us to be following. But on page 11 and page 16, it does talk about the pedestrian and sidewalk master plan and the built environment. And in reading it, my interpretation is more that this is for retrofits, redesigns, or perhaps new builds. And I'm just wondering if either staff or the presenters could speak to, is it also the intent to maintain standards while capital works are in progress in the development? Because as we will be undertaking a lot of capital work in the development, and accessibility and safety is certainly a big component of carrying on that work. Certainly what comes to mind is when the CRD did the project of the drainage under Boker Creek a couple of years back. They went to extensive trouble to ensure that bridges were put up and there was safe walking conditions over piping and sidewalks. And so that is something that is not addressed in this, and I think it might be more for staff, Mayor. But
It probably is more of an operational detail. In the engineering, I don't think we have necessarily here, but I'll go to the to the consultants at least and just get their best practices in terms of that, and if that's come up in the conversation either at the committee and or with staff.
Yes, best practice would certainly, thank you very much for the question. Best practice would certainly want us to see maintaining of the standards and both the standards that you have currently set for yourself as the district or existing sort of external standards that you're following. Really, the spirit of the legislation, as well as similar legislation across the country, is to encourage you as an entity and as a municipality to be always striving to identify barriers for people with disabilities and remove those barriers where possible. And so we would recommend that existing standards are kept in place and built upon. And we would also, again, as to recommend best practice, we would encourage you to move beyond this plan if new barriers are identified, to try to address those when they become known, rather than maybe wait for a new version of the plan. And the plan is really about taking specific actions to make improvements over time. I hope that answers part of your question at least.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions to staff or the applicant? I don't see any at this time, so I'm happy to go to the public. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak to us on the accessibility plan, you're more than welcome to do so at this time. If you're online, you can use the Zoom app to raise your hand. If you're in the hall here, you can raise your hand physically, and I will have I can call you forward. I don't see any hands popping up here for speaking. Oh, Councillor Watson, I'll come back to this table and for any additional questions or comments at this time.
I have no comment at the moment, but I just did want to recognize that 3 members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee are at the meeting tonight, joining in person or virtually. We have Clara Bisha, Nick Lapointe, and Shelby. Sorry, Shelby, I've just blanked on your last. Thank you, Shelby Kane. I was going to say Klein, and I knew that wasn't right. Shelby Kane, who are with us. So thank you. Thank you for coming to listen to the discussion.
Thank you very much. The only question I just had very quickly was just in the conversation and in the recommendations around signage. I'm just, for my clarification, what is non-regulatory municipal signage? I mean, is that just anything that isn't as required by law, like speed signs and so forth? So these would be signs that would be, I'm seeing nodding, so signs if we have a construction site or other things that are informing people or other aspects that they're looked at through an accessibility lens that we have control over. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. For something like the design of a stop sign, right? That's not that is a regulatory how that sign looks and how it's designed, and you would need to keep that in place as is. And hope that those are already accessible. And so what we're talking about here is the signage that you have direct control over in terms of how it looks, the font, the color, the layout. It's often wayfinding signage, or it could be, yes, temporary construction signage, but it may be, and it could be something like directing towards a certain district, or potentially a sign somewhere that has a map related to a certain area in the district. So pieces that you do have control over.
Thank you very much for that. And just for my clarification then, we're not reinventing the wheel here. There are some best practice guides for these that can just guide our day-to-day work. Okay, seeing nodding head. Okay, perfect. Unless there's any other questions, we can certainly get to motions at this point. And we usually start with the motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. We don't usually discuss receipt. It's just a formality. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And then I'll seek other direction from council. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
No, thank you. I'm happy to move the staff recommendation that the accessibility plan be approved and that staff work with the consultant to report back to council with an implementation plan. Yeah, I'm so appreciative of the volunteers that have given their time and to the consultant for putting together such a clear report. The things I'm most excited about are that this plan is going to be revised each year, that it's going to be a living document. I think that's really important to it. constantly being valuable to everybody, as well as that there are actions already underway due to the collaborative approach that has been undertaken with staff. So I just wanted to say how appreciative I am of the approach that's been taken so far.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, for those who don't know, Councillor Watson was our liaison for this committee as well, and appreciate her time and effort on this. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. And I just, of course, I'll be supporting that motion. I just wanted to go back and reiterate that as the consultants have presented tonight, the prioritization of these actions was a big part of the exercise. There are many things you could do. Some of them are really beyond our means at the moment. And there was definitely during the discussion, at least with the community members who gave their advice and support, that having an organization that understands and can see the world through new eyes and new lenses is a very important first step, which is why training, which may seem like, oh, you're always talking about training kind of thing, is so foundational to this plan. Because if our own staff don't really feel they have the tools and the capacity to make good operating decisions, day-to-day decisions in their work, then we really won't be able to advance this further. So in picking things that were most meaningful to those with lived experience, most mentioned by our committee members, and relevant, pragmatic, and actionable, I think we do really have a very good initial plan that, as Councillor Smart points out, will be iterated over time, and we'll be able to take on more things as we develop in our own in-house capacity and smarts around making Oak Bay accessible for our citizens and also for our employees. So I just want to thank the consultants for their work. They did a lot of consultation with staff and with the committee members, not just during meetings, but also in their own time, and lots of one-on-one conversations with our committee, our Accessibility Advisory Committee members. So thank you to that. And also thank you to Ms. Plouffe, who did very much heavy lifting to make all this happen in the short time frame that it did in 2024.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Through you, I would like to thank Councillor Watson and her committee for some great work, and also the staff. Ms. Plouffe, who supported her. I really appreciate it and appreciate the work of the members. I have to say, you're absolutely right about developing an awareness. Until you're affected by something that is either disabling or limiting, you really aren't aware of how difficult that is and how challenging that is. And so I really appreciate the work that's been done, and I appreciate that we're prioritizing. And I think training is a really good place to start. And I do hope that we will look more broadly too at our pedestrian sidewalks. I have to say they're looking a little tired these days, and I'm very careful now where I walk, and how I walk. So I hope that will extend to our walkways and obviously roads and so on. And someone raised tonight, and thank you, about a safety issue at the Foul Bay intersection. So thanks, and thanks to the consultants very much.
Thank you. I don't see other hands here on this, so the motion is in front of us. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Obviously, this is a lot of work ahead still, and some budget decisions to be made to help fund some of this work and to prioritize it. But certainly, this is a great framework for that work to start. So thank you for all the work that was undertaken. That concludes section 7.1. So again, as anybody is here for specific areas, you're always welcome to stay or leave after that. We don't quite. But 7.1, we have heat pump siting options to advance climate action. So I will invite, thank you for coming forwards. M. Woods, the Senior for Climate Action, welcome. Welcome. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bull. I'll hand over first to the introductions. That would be helpful. Please go ahead, Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Megan Wood's first appearance here at Council, our new Senior Climate. Megan worked at Township of Langley before and City of Port Coquitlam. Has about 10 years of experience, so we're really happy to have her here, and she will introduce this item together with our consultant, Devin Miller. Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Woods.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Megan Woods, and I'm pleased to have joined the District of Oak Bay in October as in the new position of Senior Planner Climate Action. The item for discussion tonight comes in response to council direction to staff during the May 13th, 2024 meeting, where staff presented recommendations to council to advance climate action through proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw and the parking facilities bylaw. The recommendations were to remove restrictions relating to the siting of heat pumps in the zoning bylaw, update the definition of gross floor area, setbacks, and building height to support high-performance buildings, require an outlet capable of providing a level 2 charge for electric vehicles in new dwellings in certain residential zones. Regarding the recommendation to remove restrictions relating to the siting of heat pumps, council requested that staff return with additional options to manage the siting of heat pumps. Staff retained Origin Sustainable Design and Planning to develop an options and recommendation report based on best practices and input from the industry. That report is included in the agenda package for this evening, and there's also a summary presentation included for your reference. I'll now pass it over to Mr. Miller from Origin to briefly introduce his report.
Welcome, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. So as Ms. Woods outlined, this report that's in front of you provides context, options, and recommendations for heat pump siting regulations for Oak Bay. As we've discussed in past meetings, heat pumps are a key component of building electrification, which is considered necessary for reducing emissions in the building sector in BC. And additionally, heat pumps provide both heating and cooling, improving resilience to climate change. And so with Oak Bay's adoption of the Zero Carbon Step Code, it is anticipated that Oak Bay will see new building applications that include heat pumps. And so it is important to provide an appropriate level of flexibility and guidance to support best practice heat pump installations and siting in Oak Bay. The report in front of you provides an overview of best practice heat pump siting considerations, input from industry representatives, as well as considerations for heat pump siting in small-scale multi-unit housing. And finally, the report includes options and recommendations for heat pump siting regulation in Oak Bay, and these recommendations aim to reduce barriers to the installation of heat pumps to improve alignment with Zero Carbon Step Code requirements and climate action goals in Oak Bay, while also ensuring best practices in heat pump siting are followed to maximize neighborliness. So I'll now pass it back to Ms. Woods to provide the staff recommendation.
Welcome, Ms. Woods. Back with Ms. Woods.
Thank you. Based on Origin's report, staff are recommending the following: that staff draft an amendment to the zoning bylaw that allows for more flexibility in the siting of heat pumps in the front and side yards, that staff draft an amendment to the anti-noise bylaw to create a 50 decibel limit on noise from heat pumps, which aligns more closely with noise restrictions in other jurisdictions and represents an increase from the 40 decibel limit that currently exists in the zoning bylaw, and that staff develop a best practice guide related to heat pump installations across various applications in order to help prevent future noise issues. Staff from Community Building and Planning Services, as well as Mr. Miller, are available to take any questions now.
Thank you very much. This is not an item for public input, so it's just questions from council. Then we'll take probably the recommendation and have a debate. I'll go with, start over here, Councillor Green, Braithwaite, Smart.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, thank you very much, Ms. Woods, and thank you to the consultants as well, and Mr. Bull. My question is about multi-family buildings. I know there was some reference in the report to some of the practices on the Lower Mainland, but I'm just asking about multifamily buildings, condominiums, stratas, that kind of thing. Can heat pumps be, if you're looking at flexible installation, would they be included in that analysis? Thank you.
Ms. Woods?
Through the mayor, yes, multifamily or multi-unit housing would be included in that analysis.
That's great news. Thank you very much.
Excuse me. You say
Sorry.
there's no public input?
Okay, so yes, so there's a question from the audience, and the query was whether or not there would be public input. So our staff procedures bylaw has restrictions as to when and where public input is.
But if I'd have known that, I would have spoken.
So just for the record, I'm just going to just term, because I don't actually, looking at this, we have public correspondence on this, and just by the nature of what it is, I don't see any particular reason we couldn't have public input on this item. For staff, Ms. Plouffe, is there anything here that would prevent us? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Murdoch. So this item was put under no public input because it is providing direction to bring it back where there would be public input at that time. council could choose to suspend the council procedure bylaw to allow public input.
Okay. We can certainly consider that, so, okay.
We have correspondence.
Yep, we do have correspondence, which is always included.
So I think that, Mayor, if it's at the appropriate time, I think we should suspend that and make the motion that we could allow for public input.
That was a totally, when people raised it, I wasn't able to have
Then I
motions.
will make that motion.
So the motion is to suspend our procedures bylaw to allow for public input on this item, is that correct?
Correct.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Suspension requires, Ms. Bloof, suspension requires 100%, 50% plus one, 2/3? I'm going to call the question if we have any, or less than a full amount, then I'll give you time to look it up. So the motion right now is just to suspend to allow for public input on this item. Unless there's any other discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed, none opposed, unanimous, so we're fine. Please go ahead, Councillor Smart, or Councillor Braithwaite. So we will allow for some public input portion. So I'll just ask people to restrict to just questions at this time, not comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report. It was great. I look forward to utilizing some of what the City of Vancouver has done in our public information that we give out to the public, because I think they did a really good job. My question is around the 50 decibels. And I know that in the report it talked a little bit about the number of complaints that we had at the 40 decibel level. And I'm wondering if you could just touch on that, and if you think you'll see an increase at the 50 decibel, or if the type of machinery that is now available will make it so that it'll be a much even lesser noticeable than what it was at 40 decibels.
Sure. Would that be better to give it to Mr. Miller, maybe perhaps as an industry piece? And perhaps we could be a little clearer about where that is measured. Is that decibel level at the property line, at the distance from the device, et cetera?
Sure, thank you through the mayor. Typically how that's measured is from the point of reception, which is typically at the property line. And so to answer your question, by making it sort of more lenient, 50, it's more reflective of contemporary modern heat pump installations. We would anticipate fewer complaints as a result of that, to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, and then have Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff or consultant as appropriate. My question is, how and when would the guidelines potentially be distributed, and will they be actively distributed? And what I'm getting at is there even a way that we could have, say, a checkbox on the building permit form that they've been reviewed, or a checklist that people submit with a building permit application, so that decisions can be made at an early enough stage to follow the guidelines? So I'm just wondering how we could make these guidelines most impactful. Thank you.
Sure, I might give that to Mr. Bowl. Thinking here in terms of our process to attach those and make that most visible at the earliest possible part of the application process.
Thank you, Mayor. We could make this part of the building permit intake process. We haven't really discussed it in detail just yet. It could be out there as a general resource for applicants looking into preparing building permit applications. So those would be a few ways to deal with this early on, because that's indeed the best timing for it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Oh, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, and I don't know if we have the appropriate staff member here to answer this question, but I just wanted to know, I guess, what the current process is at bylaw enforcement, and does it have to be 2 complaints in which to get response from bylaw with regards to a sound issue that may be impacting a neighbor? And the reason I bring this up is because I have actually had a lot of residents contact me about noise concerns that they haven't reported because they don't want to have friction between their neighbor, and yet they're very unhappy and therefore don't have a good relationship with their neighbor. So I just wanted to know, what is that process like if I have a neighbor with a noisy heat pump, or I don't even know which neighbor it is that has the noisy heat pump? How does that all play out?
Mr. Bowl?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor. It depends a bit on the circumstances, because this is one example where the neighbor that faces the heat pump is the likely one to notice if something is wrong, or it's making too much noise, and it will be hard to expect another second neighbor to have the same concern, because it's not going to be the same concern. So we recognize that, and I do know from the few examples that we've have dealt with, it's looked at by case. The Ballot Compliance official can have a look himself and see what the nature of the noise is, and based on that, we try to find a way forward. Usually, it's a matter of making sure the neighbor is aware of the issue, and because commonly it has to do with aging pumps that need some attention. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, thank you. Through Mayor, I just have one more question, and it's just with regards to current processes. I know that in our neighborhood, we do actually have heat pumps on rooftops, side yards, and front yards. So I'm wondering, would those have been likely constructed with a Board of Variance process, or are there some heat pumps being installed these days kind of in an unpermitted way? I'm just wondering, with our strict rules, how I can anecdotally see heat pumps in so many alternate locations already. Thank you.
Mr. Bohm?
Thank you, Mayor. We haven't reviewed that in detail, but it's possible that heat pumps have been installed without a further building permitting process. That's possible. That might be the case of some of the examples that you see out there. Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to, again, the consultant, Mr. Miller, or staff as appropriate. The first question is just a technical one. I feel I should know this from some high school science class, but I don't. If there are multiple heat pumps in really a single location, and they're all operating at 50 decibels, is the total sound still 50 decibels, or is it additive in some way?
Through the Mayor, I can't provide a number, but there is some amplification that can happen if they're sort of clustered together. Usually in that case, say if that was in, for example, a small-scale multi-unit housing building, that would be a bit more care placed into where that cluster would be provided on site.
Thank you. And the second question, it may be maybe initially for Mr. Miller, if I could, through the Mayor. At one point, I think it's in your report, you talk about trying to achieve consistency with other bylaws because the development industry is looking for support so they know what to do. And you've given Victoria and Vancouver as two examples. I'm just wondering if you can talk, I know that sometimes local governments are criticized, particularly within development catchment areas, about not all doing exactly the same thing. So if we adopted option 2, would we be making it more difficult or easier for the development industry in Greater Victoria if we sort of still, in a way, step out on our own to pick our own set of standards? That might be a better question for, actually, maybe that's a better question for Ms. Woods. I'll let you guys
give it to
fight
Mr.
over
Miller.
it.
I think this is, best you can.
Through the Mayor, so how to address this question? I am aware that similar changes are being contemplated in other communities in the capital region. The status of those, I think, kind of not 100% sure, but in progress, let's say. In terms of the question around consistency, I think what we're seeing, there's consistency now on the zero carbon step code adoption in the region, which I think speaks to that consistency that is sought from industry. On the side of heat pump siting, it is actually quite different in each municipality that you look at. There's some tougher to work in municipalities than others. Industry feedback through this process suggested Oak Bay was one of the tougher ones to implement, and so that's partly where the rationale came from this. But given the various states of the zoning bylaws in the region, it's and the various state status of the work of updating those zoning bylaws, it's sort of, let's say it's on a lot of to-do lists, but not necessarily implemented in various communities.
Thank you.
And thank you. That's helpful. And then finally, I think this is for Ms. Woods. So what in the options presented to staff? There's a recommendation for option 2, which is guidance with some best practices, and then an actual fixed limit on the decibel level. And I just wondered if you could comment on, like, what does a best practice and guidance really do if somebody comes in and they haven't met all the things in the best practice guide, how would the planning department respond to that, or the site, whoever's reviewing the building plans respond to that on an application by application basis? I ask that because I want to know if we're really just in effect creating a standard but calling it a best practices guide.
Thank you. Mr. Bull?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The brochure or the guidance material would be just for information, but there would be a few regulations that end up in the zoning bylaw and the anti-noise bylaw. Those would be the ones that we would test for at time of building permit, and only if heat pumps are not complying to those particular requirements in the zoning bylaw, we would take action. So it means that the brochure would give additional information and just general other ideas about what might be the ideal location versus a okay location. So yeah, definitely a clear distinction between what are regulations and just background information in a brochure. Thank you.
So just to clarify, so it's not just decibel level. It could be very specific things around distances from site lot lines and everything. Okay, thank you. So it's not just one thing. It may be a cluster of things plus this general helpful information. Thank you.
I don't have anybody else on my question speakers list. So I'm going to ask Mr. Miller just to scoot over maybe one seat and invite members of the public, either online or in person. You're welcome to come forward. We had a great demonstration earlier of the right process here. You can just push the button on the microphone, state your full name and municipality of residence, and you have up to 3 minutes to talk to us.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for bending the rules. My name's Gary Curtis. I live just down the road in Oak Bay. I live in an apartment condominium. We actually have 3 heat pumps, all in the back of the building, so they are effectively in the backyard.
And Mr. Curtis, I want you to know we did get your correspondence in our package, so we have had a chance to read it.
Right, so what I'll say tonight is really what was, quickly is what was in there. So there are 5 issues related to heat pumps that I wanted to raise. The first one is fairness. Heat pumps, they're a very important resource for all residents of the province and for condo owners too. But at the present time, 3/4 of condo owners are unable to have heat pumps. They simply can't because of the current bylaw. In terms of noise, the heat pumps now are very quiet. Recently, I was out on my deck sweeping. It was a cold day, and I thought, is my damn new heat pump, is it actually working? So I walked over and put my ear right next to it, and I could hear it. There's a heat pump on the ground floor. I'm up on the 4th floor. I have never walked by there and heard it going, and I know that Heather's not freezing to death in there, so they are very quiet, and I have fairly good hearing. Affordability, this is an important issue for everybody. Heating with the baseboard heaters, which is what most condos have, is very expensive. BC Hydro states that heat pumps are 300% more efficient than electric baseboard heaters and 50% more efficient than cooling or using a typical air conditioning unit. In terms of climate change, heat pumps are a really important way of reducing greenhouse gases, and I know that's a priority for Oak Bay. There's a key health and safety issues here. Many condo owners are elderly, like me, and actually in our condo, I'm one of the youths. And for elderly people, they're very subject to heat, and heat waves can be a real problem, heat domes. The heat pumps are very effective in dealing with that, and portable air conditioners often don't work very well in condos. They don't fit properly in the windows. They're very heavy, and old people like me have trouble carrying them around. So that's really what I wanted to say. I guess I would conclude by saying, I beg with you, please I don't think the 50 decibel at the border limit will be a problem. If there were 8 heat pumps instead of 3 in our backyard, I don't think you could hear it at the edge of the border. But if on a day when it's 120 Fahrenheit, and maybe that day you could hear it, perhaps there'd be a little bit of leeway. Otherwise, you'll have people in that condo dying. Finally, I would say that although I'm here as a private citizen, I'm actually on the council of our condominium, have been for 5 years, and I was involved in creating, drafting, and working with a lawyer to prepare the bylaws that we use to manage the installation of heat pumps and making sure that they fit with the current 40 decibel bylaw, municipal bylaw, and otherwise that they are acceptable to our neighbors as well as the neighbors who live on other properties. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis. Although not clearly timed to yourself, you came within about 8 seconds of the 3-minute time limit, so well done. Anybody else wish to speak to council? Not seeing any other hands. Thank you for raising your hand. We always try to make sure we accommodate public input if we can. So back to this table here, we've had a chance for questions. Certainly would be happy
to make the staff move the staff recommendation.
Can I
of
just get a
option
motion to receive?
Oh, sorry,
first,
move
and
receipt.
Moved and seconded. As you note, discuss receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move the staff recommendation, which is option 2.
Option moved and seconded. Thank you. So this is, just for clarification, it's 2A, including the 50 decibel limit. That's the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on that? I'm happy to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And also just that staff develop a best practice guide. Is that the, okay? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff and the consultant, Mr. Miller, and your team. I think the report made us a very easy process. The review with both industry and best practices and looking at other jurisdictions, I think made this a very clear and straightforward report. So thank you very much for the time taken to get us here. Sometimes the shortness of the meeting time is reflection of the amount of work that goes into it ahead of that. So thank you for that. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is 9.1. We're under bylaws and permits. So we have up first a couple of upland siting and design. Upland siting and design are not subject to public input. They are a recommendation here for council's consideration that go through advisory design panel. The first one up, 9.1, is 3380 Ripon Road, and we have with us Mr. Muller. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. The district has received an upland siting design application for 3380 Ripon Road. This application is pertaining to proposed 2,800 square foot addition to the existing principal building, also including installation of a hot tub, pool, and various landscaping features. This addition is focused on accessibility and increasing function in the home. And if it's all detailed in the report, and if there's any questions, we have Pamela Beta, the applicant, as well as the homeowner and the builder as well in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members of the council to the applicant or to staff? This is not super uncommon that we don't. These are often fairly straightforward applications, as long as they're within the bylaws like this one is. I don't see any. So we don't need a further presentation from the applicants. I think I'll go straight to our council. Can I first have a motion to receive the report? Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And then I need a motion from council, motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, the siting and design application be approved. Seconded. Thank you. Again, so this is for 3380 Ripon Road. Any further discussion? I'm not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for sitting through the longer part of the meeting to get to that. But that is the nature of these meetings sometimes. Moving on to 9.2, which is another upland siting and design for 3609 Cadbro Bay Road. Mr. Muller, you're up again.
Thank you, Mayor. The district has received an upland siting design application for 3609 Cadbro Bay Road. This application is for the extensive renovation to the existing single-family home that's detailed in the report. If there's any questions of the applicant, the owner of the home, they're in the audience today, Leonard Cole. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions from members of council to the applicant or to staff? Head shakes all around. So I will get a motion to receive, please. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And then can I have a motion just if you say it out loud. So this is a motion to approve citing upland siting and design for 3609 Cadborough Bay Road. Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Thank you very much. Good luck with the project. We move on to the last couple of, or yeah, getting pretty close to the end. People are welcome to leave or stay as you see fit. Hopefully, it won't be too much longer either way. Thank you. Have a good evening. Item number 9.3. This is for bylaw adoption, where we again on adoption we don't have public input. So this is we've had the first 3 readings, and now we're back at this table. I don't think we need any introduction of these items, so I'm just going to move straight to first one.
I'll move that emergency program bylaw number 4890/2024 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Don't usually debate on adoption, but if it's something that people wish to raise, this is the time to do it. Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then we move to 9.4. It's amenity cost charge bylaw.
I'll move that the amenity cost charge bylaw number 4892/2024 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Councillor Smart.
I just want to indicate that I will be consistently voting against this because I'm concerned about the combined costs of the DCCs and ACCs at a time where we're trying to contribute to housing.
Understood. Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor and those opposed. Councillor Smart registered as opposed. That does carry. We move to new business. Is there any new business for members of council? Then we move to correspondence from other governments or agencies. We have correspondence from the City of Victoria with the recommendation that we receive the letter, but we have to receive the letter. Perhaps we can get a motion to receive, and then we can have a discussion. Is there anything else? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion on the letter? Councillor Smart?
Well, thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity just again to voice my interest in looking at feasibility studies on municipally owned land for housing options. It's something that has been discussed at the council table previously and is not currently in the immediate plans, but it is in eventual plans. So I just wanted to, with this in front of us here, just talk about how excited I would be to look at having a project on municipal land. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll call the question on receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
Move adjournment.
Yeah, I think there's nothing else on your agenda, so moved and seconded. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. And we will see you all back here next week for Committee of the Whole.